What's up, everybody? Welcome back to episode 41 of the Punching Down podcast. It has been a couple weeks. My last episode was it was well timed. I feel a bit of bad luck in terms of timing, but so the last episode, I believe, came out the day after the insurgency or whatever, the coup attempt, the Capitol raid, whatever they wanted to call it. So I decided, because you're going to be listening to this episode on Thursday, and I was going to do this yesterday, and then I was like, you know what? I should maybe just wait to see what shakes out with the inauguration. Just maybe something crazy happens, and then I'd be worried that people would be like listening to it, and they'd be like, yeah, something insane happened, and you missed it, and you can't talk about it till next week. So we waited. The inauguration is done. It was kind of an all-day affair. Lady Gaga was there. Garth Brooks. Wow, Garth Brooks. It's funny too, because they're like, we need to get somebody like, that the Trump people will approve of. And so I guess Kid Rock wasn't going to come. He probably declined. So they're like, we'll get Garth Brooks. And then there's like a video apparently of Garth Brooks without a mask on hugging like Obama and Biden and stuff, or Biden's wife. It was pretty funny. Although I imagine every one of those people has got the vaccine, so probably no biggie. But yeah, so the Capitol raid, which I haven't really talked about, that was pretty ridiculous. It's funny too. I have a friend of mine who he's a Trump supporter, and the day before the Capitol riots, he straight up messaged me. We were talking, and he's like, I'm going to Washington tomorrow. He's like, room for one more if you want to come. And I was like, yeah, I'm good on that. It's the whole thing was crazy. Like, first off, especially as it unfolded, because you're watching it and all these people are like, storming. And the thing is, that was like such a perfect example of how people can do shit, like really, really stupid shit when you're in a mob, because it's so easy to just get carried away and not think about repercussions. Like the amount of people, so people were like there, and, they were probably like, we're just going to do a fun little protest, stop the steal, all that nonsense. And then, and that's another thing too, is Trump, since the last episode, all his social media has been deleted. He's been fucking wiped off the face of the earth. But so anyways, so all these people were like, we're going to do a protest. And then Trump gives his little speech, and he's like, you can't accept this. And then they're like, it just, you've seen it in a million times in crowds before, where it just, they keep kind of pushing a bit, and then they were just so unprepared for it that now that I'm saying that, I wonder if, it's probably crazy that I'm saying that, but like, I wonder if like the people and the government knew, and they're like, you know what, just let it happen, because we're going to be able to fucking destroy this whole movement and Trump, basically, if we just allow this. But so anyways, they all like broke in. All these people were like filming themselves committing essentially like light treason, which was fucking nuts. Like, but that's how, like, it's the interesting nature of being part of a mob, where you can go do something that is so fucking idiotic, and in the moment you're like, yeah, I mean, everybody else is doing this. This seems fine. Like a really good example of that was in the I think this was, I forget what year it was, 2012 or something, in Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. The Vancouver Canucks lost to the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup, in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup. And Vancouver just rioted. They had crazy riots. And there was like, I remember there's this one kid who just was like, because the whole mob was doing all this crazy shit. This kid just like lit a cop car on fire, like on camera. He's like, yeah, this is probably not a big deal. He just got caught up in the mob. And then the next day you're like, dude, you lit a cop car on fire. Like, you're on camera doing it. Like, you're in a lot of trouble. And like in the moment, people don't think about this, but there's just so many people who are like, are going to get 25 years in jail because they were like, I mean, that woman got shot in the neck and died. Which is that kind of just got swept under the rug pretty quickly. They're like, yeah, sometimes you get shot in the neck. The lamest thing was the people who keep calling it a coup, because you're like, it wasn't a fucking coup. Like, government was never at risk of like losing power. Like, imagine there's a scenario where all these people break in and all of a sudden they're like, hey, you know that like wolf dude who's shaman, that QAnon shaman guy? Yeah, he's running the show right now. He's head of the FBI, so everybody's taking their cues from the QAnon shaman. No pun intended. Like Baked Alaska. I don't know if you know who this guy is. This was the funniest one because this guy is such a piece of shit. So he's like an alt-right YouTuber guy that I'm sure a lot of people, maybe some of you know. But anyways, so his this year, he was doing this thing called the Year of Baked Alaska, which this guy was at like Charlottesville and he got like maced, like pepper sprayed at Charlottesville, and he was at I think he was at he was at Charlottesville, but so he was doing this thing like where he was driving around in an RV, and he was doing this only because like lots of people would watch him. I talked about this on another podcast, but like, you know, he would just get all these viewers watching him streaming, and they would pay him like, you know, here's $5. And but he would do crazy like shit, but they weren't even like pranks because they weren't funny. They were just like all mean. Like he would just go into like a 7-Eleven, some poor woman's working, and he's just like, he's like, wouldn't wear a mask, and she's like, can you please put on a mask? And he's like, fuck you, bitch, you fat whore, and like all this just insane shit. And then he would get in these confrontations, and then right as someone was about to like kick his ass, for justifiably, he would pepper spray them. Like, and he was videotaping this, so all these people were like watching him, and a lot of people were watching it because they were like, they wanted to see him get fucked up, and he was kind of like, you know, whatever, it's paying my bills, I guess I'll maybe go get beaten up or whatever. But so he was doing this pepper spraying all these people, and then I guess he got charged in Arizona for one of these things where he got charged for assault for pepper spraying someone, and then he was like out on bond or whatever the fuck. And then so he went to the Capitol, at which point he made his way inside with the rest of the mob. And then he's so stupid. This guy's on YouTube live streaming in the Capitol, and you're like, dude, you're committing like a felony right now, and you're live streaming it. And then they issue a warrant for his arrest, because obviously it's so easy to find this guy. They issue a warrant for his arrest, at which point it turns out that he wasn't allowed to leave the state of Arizona because of his last thing. So you're like, not only are you now like, you know, in trouble for leaving the state when you're on like whatever bail, although, you know what, that's probably the last of his problems, but that guy was a fucking piece of shit. And normally when stuff like this is like, I'm not sympathetic to being like caught up in the mob, although part of me is sympathetic for a lot of these people, because you're like, there is this element where I feel like they all just got duped, and then they wound up at this thing, and it was just like, you know, in the moment it seemed like a good idea, and then like so many of these people's lives are just like ruined forever because they decided to storm the Capitol. But yeah, so Baked Alaska is probably going to jail for all those people too. They're going to make examples of them, even though there's not even like a need to make examples of them. And then that's the funny too, because yesterday was Trump's. It's Wednesday night right now, but you'll be listening to this on Thursday. But yesterday was Trump's last day in office, and then everybody's like, "Oh, he's going to pardon." He's going to pardon a lot of people. Legitimately thought he was going to pardon all these YouTubers, and like, or not YouTubers, but like people. I guess Baked Alaska, but like people who they were in the Capitol, because there's the one guy who's like the shaman guy who I was referencing, who was like on a hunger strike because they wouldn't give him organic food, which you wouldn't think that would be a MAGA person really, but Trump didn't. He just mostly pardoned a bunch of regular people, then some friends. Didn't pardon Snowden or Julian Assange. So they're kind of still fucked. But I remember reading on Twitter, like all these people are like, yeah, he's going to pardon all these people. And then his pardons were mostly, he didn't pardon himself. Everybody thought he was going to pardon himself. Didn't pardon himself. He left pretty unceremoniously. I mean, it's insane. There's just so much to discuss with that. Because, you know, everyone's basically turned their backs on Trump at the moment. Like, I've never seen a movement just get derailed so hard, so fast. Like the moment that Capitol insurgency thing happened, so many just like, you know, regular Trump supporters who were like, I like him for whatever his borders policy, because there was probably a lot of people who were like, you know what, they kind of held their nose for a lot of stuff, but they're like, you know what, there's one thing he does that I'm really like in favor of, excuse me, and I support him. And then that happened. All the middle of the road people were like, all right, fuck this. This is like he crashed and burned so hard. But anyways, he got kicked off of every social media. So he has no social media. People are saying he's going to start a new party called the Patriot Party, which of course he would call it the Patriot Party. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. People were saying he was going to start his own social media network, which doubtful, because you can't. That was the funny thing too, because it's like with he gets kicked off of Twitter, and then Parler was like, the moment he got kicked off of Twitter, the CEO of Parler, which if you don't know what Parler is, it's like the kind of like unmoderated, they call it like whatever, the right wing Twitter. It's a brutal app. Like I remember like maybe 3 months ago, people were like, oh, there's all these people going on Parler. It's going to be like the new big thing. You should check it out. And I like went on there. I'm like, this is the buggiest app. Like it turns out you need tens of millions of dollars and thousands of programmers to make a fucking app work well. So it was just a piece of shit. So I was like, I was maybe on Parler for 4 minutes before I was like, I'm out of here. But so anyways, Trump gets kicked off of Twitter. And the CEO of Parler is like, this is it. He's like, he probably had fucking dollar signs in his eyes. He's like, finally, this is it. And then instantly, like almost instant, and Trump didn't even set up an account, but almost instantly, Parler was removed from like the Google App Store, and then Apple gave them an ultimatum the next day, or Apple gave them 24 hours to go. If you don't start moderating your content, we're pulling you from the Apple App Store. At which point, if you're out of Apple and Android, that's it, you're done. And then not only on top of that, Amazon, which has this thing called AWS, which is essentially like, the architecture of everything on the internet, was their host. And then Amazon was like, you know what, we're pulling your hosting as well. So that was just the end of it. They basically got wiped off. So, there's been a lot of talk about the power of, these essentially big tech oligarchs who can like do whatever the fuck they want. And, and people are mixed because a lot of people were like, yeah, you know what, it's probably a good thing, but you just did give them powers, and you might agree with how they use it now, but you might not agree with how they use it next time. Like for example, this was actually on the Associated Press wrote an article. So it's called "Extremists Exploit a Loophole in Social Moderation" podcast. Essentially, what they're saying, and again, is like basically what they're saying is, hey, all these companies like are able to moderate all this content, but the one thing that you can just basically say whatever the fuck you want is on a podcast, and you should come forward next. And they're like, yeah, why won't they come forward next? The one thing I guess I could say is it's pretty hard to vet every single podcast, but if you're a high profile like if Trump starts a podcast, which I don't know why he wouldn't start a podcast, that would probably be the biggest, smartest thing he can do, because Steve Bannon was essentially kicked off of everything, and Steve Bannon just started his own podcast, which Steve Bannon got a pardon as well for like duping people out of like paying for the wall, which by the way, the wall that kind of didn't work out, huh? They that was an interesting time. It's obvious it's over. I mean, I don't know how much it's over. I honestly thought today, I was like, man, there's gonna be some crazy shit going on with the inauguration. The QAnon people, you got to feel bad for. Actually, before I go on to the QAnon people, but yeah, so like Google and Apple probably distribute, I don't know, 70-80% between probably them and Spotify, which I guess even still Google and Apple can be like, like I wonder if Spotify could have a podcast of questionable content, and then Google and Apple, because they distribute Spotify, could just be like, hey, we're removing Spotify if Spotify doesn't remove, which they probably could. I'm sure Spotify would be like, okay, yeah, we're not going to jeopardize our entire fucking business model just to host this one podcast. But so, there will be a scenario where podcasts are getting removed. Yeah, it's an interesting one. But so yes, back to QAnon. QAnon, I feel bad for, as weird as it sounds, I feel kind of bad for the QAnon people because, so if you don't know what QAnon is, basically they think Trump was the Messiah, which it seems plausible that he could be the Messiah, and that so Trump was the Messiah, and he was going to be president. I don't know if he was going to be president forever. I'm not going to lie. I haven't read about it too much. But the main thing was that they were going to like arrest all the like pedophiles in politics in Washington, which is pretty much all of the Democratic ones. They were all pedophiles, according to Q. And then Trump would be serving a second term. So there's all these people who like there are people all over America who woke up this morning and were like, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen today, but something's going to happen at the inauguration where, you know, Trump's going to storm in and then he's going to be back to being president. Like, I'm sure some really just sad people just watched it all day and then they were like, it's any minute now, any minute Trump's going to storm in and he's going to take shit over and boom, we're going to be back in business and I'm going to be able to put my Make America Great Again hat back on and then no, it's not happening. I saw someone on Twitter, I think it was like in a 4chan thing, because that's where QAnon started, was in 4chan. I still wonder, it must be like just, you know, a regular, like part of me thinks it's probably like a 16-year-old kid because it's on 4chan. Like that seems more likely. Then a lot of people are like, oh, it's like some government insider in the White House. There's a lot of speculation, really, too. Like, what is Trump going to do from here? He went, he's in Florida. I imagine he's going to be playing a lot of golf and chilling a lot. But like the damage, like they basically are just like, we're wiping this guy digitally off the face of this earth. And that cost him, that one thing cost him so much fucking money, which is really the way you hurt him the most is in the pocketbook. Like a guy like that, that's how you really hurt him the most. But that cost, like he lost so many. Like for example, like the PGA Tour plays events at Trump golf courses because he owns all these golf courses, and they canceled there was a major tournament that was supposed to be at a golf course, and basically they're like, we're never gonna do a tournament ever at a Trump course ever again. And like Deutsche Bank, which is basically like, the funny thing is like Deutsche Bank, they're like, you know, they probably launder money for like fucking terrorists and drug dealers and stuff, and they're like, yeah, we're not gonna do any new business with Trump. Like literally banks are like this guy's getting not only like deplatformed, he's getting debanked. It's like pretty hardcore. But yeah, the QAnon people, I wonder what the QAnon people are gonna do. Like, are they just gonna just be like, all right, we'll just go back to being just regular Christians? Like, because they're essentially cult people. They're like, you know, they live in a cult, and then they're like, yeah, I guess we got to find a new cult. That must be a bummer. Like your whole identity was tied to that. Like these people are just like posting on Facebook all day about just dumb memes and then just all of a sudden, and you know, they're all just so certain it was going to happen. Then all of a sudden it's just like, that's it. I would like to say too, I mean, I don't know if this is like oversimplification, but because for the entire duration of the Trump presidency, I was like, everybody's like, oh my God, America's never going to go back. We're never going to recover from this. It's over. And I was always just like, yeah, it's going to be fine. I know everybody wants to be so fatalistic and be like, yeah, Trump is the end of America, but you know, the country's bigger than a president, and you know, the country's had bad presidents before, ones who, you know, arguably were worse than Trump, even though obviously I think recency bias, few will agree with that. But, you know, it's fine. It's, you know, it's today, and people are like, oh, there's COVID, blah, blah, blah. But you're like, yeah, if Biden was the president, we'd still have COVID. There'd still be lots of people dead. This isn't fucking Asia. Although he is going pretty hard. He was signing some executive orders today. He's undoing all the stuff Trump did too. He's like, basically, if you're an illegal immigrant in the U.S., he's like, all right, you're a citizen now. Fuck you, Trump. Wall's done. You're a citizen. Wear a mask. All sorts of fun stuff. He's essentially doing the opposite of Trump. But everybody was so just, you know, the nonsense of like, oh my God, America's never gonna. And again, if there are 50% of Americans, maybe 40%, who legitimately do think, though, that what happened at the Capitol was a coup instead of like just a band of idiots. And granted, there were people who like brought weapons there. Like you definitely had some lunatics, but the idea that that was like an organized coup, like similar to like what happened in Turkey a few years ago, or like, you know, what happens in, you know, failed states or whatever, was ludicrous. And then you also need the fact that all these people are going to have to admit that they're like in a week and they're like, I kind of miss Trump. Like people are obviously not going to miss him, but then at the same time, like, you're going to miss some of the shenanigans. Some of the shenanigans you're going to miss. I guarantee it. You know, he had some funny sound bites. He kept you on your toes. Like, who the fuck is going to watch CNN right now? Why would you ever watch CNN at this point? You're like, all right, you won. Democracy was saved. There's zero chance that you turn on the TV in 2 days and they're not talking about Trump. Like, it's just going to, like, the next 4 years is just going to be like, just, hey, remember how bad those 4 years of Trump were? Like, they're just going to keep bringing it up because Biden is not going to give them enough to talk about. The whole thing will just be like, hey, remember Trump? Man, that was crazy. Remember this crazy thing Trump did? That was bad. Remember the My Pillow guy? This is also one of my favorite things of what's going on. Is like a few days before Trump was. This is maybe like a week ago, last week. The My Pillow guy, if you don't know him, his name's Mike Lindell, former crack addict who found Jesus, turned his life around, started this giant pillow empire. This dude, so I guess he advertises a shit ton on Fox News and like became friendly with Trump. And so then he had a meeting with Trump a week before Trump was to leave office. This is after the Capitol stuff. And so he was seen going into the White House and he had like a piece of paper and people like, there was like a photo of the paper and people kind of saw some of the things. And he was essentially like, he had all these like, he had like a pick for like a new CIA director. This is like a CEO of a fucking pillow company. Had like a new pick for the CIA director. And it said something about like, he's like, you need to implement martial law. Like imagine Trump is like, yeah, I talked to the My Pillow guy and he makes some good points. So we're going to have to implement martial law right now. Which is insane. And then now all these companies are dropping My Pillow from their stores, like Bed Bath and Beyond, or like, yeah, we no longer carry My Pillow. That was like, honestly, all the My Pillow guy has to do, that guy has just got so drunk with power. Like the guy was like, you know, he's obviously made a lot of money and then he has access to the president, even though the president was like, at that point had zero power essentially. Although he did pardon Lil Wayne and Kodak Black. I forgot about that. Yeah, he pardoned Lil Wayne for like a gun crime and Kodak Black, who's a rapper, also for a gun crime. Why, I don't really know, other than just like for sure Trump too, like he's like, you know, he has some grand plan in the future where he's like, yeah, I'm going to pardon these guys because I'm going to do something where he's like currying the favor of the young black community or something where he's like, remember me? I'm the guy who pardoned Lil Wayne for a gun crime. But yeah, so it's over though. Unless you ask the Q people. There was one conspiracy, this is what I was talking about. There was one Q conspiracy where Trump is like, if you remember the movie Face Off with Nicolas Cage and John Travolta. So the theory was that the government had created this. It's not even a theory because it's obviously so stupid, but this was making the rounds on Twitter where the government has created this technology where they could swap faces, and they took Biden's face and put it on Trump's face. So then Trump would actually be the one getting inaugurated for his second term, but it would, even though it looks like it's Biden, but you're like, they have completely different bodies. You know, conspiracies can be fun, but these people are fucking morons. You know, a lot of these people are the same people who are just videotaping themselves, live streaming, committing serious felonies. Death to QAnon. Although, you know what? I'm telling you, I'll call this right now. I don't know if this podcast will be going on in 20 years, but in 20 years, QAnon merch will be some hot shit. If you have QAnon, like, you know how, like, right now, like, basically right now, like, if I could just get t-shirts that I wore when I was, like, 12, but brand new, they're all like worth $250. Like I remember I had this like Chris Webber jersey that cost me like $10 that now is like 200. I'm like, well, this doesn't make sense. But QAnon, mark my words, QAnon merch in the future. That's gonna be some hot merch. Maybe some My Pillows too, if that company goes out of business entirely. I was talking about the martial law thing in my home country, Canada. I was just talking to, I was just reading about it. I was talking to my mom because they live outside of Toronto, and it's locked the fuck down. It is really locked down there. But so, right now in Ontario, they don't have a lot of vaccines. They only have like enough vaccines for like essential workers and, like people in retirement homes, like the really elderly, because Canada doesn't have their own like manufacturing plants or whatever. They get them from, I think, somewhere in Europe, like the Netherlands or Belgium, and then Pfizer there had to like shut down their factory to like retool it. So like my parents were like, yeah, we're not gonna be able to get any vaccines till like April, because people ask me, they're like, what's the difference between Canada and America? And it's just these little things, even though that's not a little thing, like having access to a vaccine, but it is stuff like that. But so anyways, in Canada right now, because I guess the COVID's bad, and then there's this new variant, which is like, apparently I was this podcast I listened to, one of the guys on it was tweeted, he's like a science guy. I'm a moron to even say that, but he's like he's a really smart. He's like a biologist or something. But he said that there's this COVID variant, this new COVID variant, excuse me, in South Africa, and it's getting to the point where actually it might be able to infect people who have antibodies from like the original COVID, which if that happens, and it's like more it's more transmissible. So if that happens, we might just be living through another version of last year, a Groundhog Day, if you will, minus the Trump. I would say that it would be, if that did happen, then at least, Biden will have his shot to see if he could do better if we kind of have just a redoing of exactly what happened last year. But so in Ontario, anyways, it's bad. And they're now like speaking of, I only thought about this because of the martial law thing, but so they're starting to like, you can't like walk, like if you're a group of people and you're walking down the street, and I think if it's more than 4 people, you can get they're giving $880 tickets. This woman, in outside of Toronto, she like dropped her kids off. She had to go like pick her kids up from school or something, or she like dropped her kids off at their grandfather's place. And then like her uncle or brother was there or something. And, there's a bunch of people like gathering, but like she was doing it to like drop the kids off. And then the neighbors like called the police on her. The police like showed up and they gave them all like $880 tickets. And then there was another thing where a car of just 4 people got pulled over because the cops suspected that they weren't in the same family, essentially. Like they suspected, they're like, hey, maybe you don't live together. And then they didn't, and they gave them all $880 tickets, which is like, isn't that literally what martial law is? Where, they don't call it martial law in Canada. They want to use maybe slightly more flowery language, but that's basically what it is, martial law. So that's another big difference between Canada and America, because that shit would not fucking fly here at all. People have guns. They have a lot of guns. And, that's just the difference. It's just like, it's a cultural thing where here, like, they're almost willing to be like, you know what? We'll take a few more. Grandma can die of COVID or the COVID variant, but we're not giving up our rights to do shit like this. Like, we're not just gonna let people pull us over for, although I'm sure you do get pulled over for all sorts of nonsense reasons in America, but that one, it seems, especially where you're like, what, you're just pulling them over for the only reason is you think they maybe don't live together. I wonder, because it was just like they weren't all the same race, because Canada's pretty multiracial. They pulled them over. Speaking of multiracial, this is a good segue. I'm good at segues. The Washington Post had an article because so now we're in the phase of Trump where everybody's trying to dissect the last 4 years. They go, how did that happen? How did that, even though it's been done to death, they're still like, how did that happen? What happened? How do we make sure that never happens again? I mean, the odds are that's going to literally be the thing that happens in 2024. But, they're all like, how does that not happen again? We need to know. How do we make sure this never happens again? It's going to happen again, I promise you. I mean, it might be Trump, or if even worse, it could be like Eric Trump, President Eric Trump. But the Washington Post had an article, and it says, to understand Trump's support, we must think in terms of multiracial whiteness. Just so let me say this again. To understand Trump's support, we must think in terms of multiracial whiteness. So now they're basically being like, there's to be white. White's more of like a mental, like that's basically what they're saying. Is like white went from like, white people, like, your skin color. And now they're like, white's more just like a mentality. It's kind of how you walk. So here's a snippet from this. It says, the Trump administration's anti-immigration, anti-civil rights stance has made it easy to classify the president's loyalists as a homogenous mob of white nationalists. But take a look at the FBI poster showing people wanted an insurrectionist assault on the U.S. Capitol. Among many white faces are a few that are clearly Latino or African American. And so basically they're saying like, those people might not look white, but, inside of them, they're white people. Because only white people would do that, even though a third of Latino voters did vote to reelect Trump in 2020. But so basically they're saying they're like, oh yeah, which is like, that used to be such a, like a racist thing where someone would be like, oh, you're, like a black person. You'd be like, oh, but you talk like you're white. Like, and that'd be like, people would say that as like a compliment, but it would obviously be like super racist, like, 20 years ago. And then now they're like, yeah, you don't say that. But then now they're like, yeah, but if you vote the wrong way, then you kind of voted white. So you're kind of white, aren't you? But anyways, that was multiracial whiteness was pretty good. Here's another choice paragraph. Rooted in America's ugly history of white supremacy, indigenous disposition, and anti-blackness, multiracial whiteness is an ideology invested in the unequal distribution of land, wealth, power, and privilege, a form of hierarchy in which the standing of one section of the population is premised on the debasement of others. Multiracial, like imagine you're like in one of these groups and you're like, wait, I'm getting swept up. I'm a white person now. Like I remember for me, because I'm Jewish, and then I remember like definitely feeling like I was always specifically Jewish, and then maybe like 4 or 5 years ago it was just, you're like, oh no, you're just a white guy now. Like I did a joke about it, but like it was always like, it always felt like I was like not exactly white, and then now I'm just like, oh no, you're just a white guy now. And then now they're really trying to just wrap as many people up in the whole white thing as they possibly can. They're really trying to just, even though it's really seems to be mostly a political thing, but they're putting all white people, and then they're just lumping in every other undesirable / deplorable person that they don't want. They go, yeah, you're just all white people. It's and then here's another one. Thinking in terms of multiracial whiteness helps us recognize that much of today's political rift is a division between those who are drawn to and remain invested in a politics of whiteness and those who seek something better. I'm reading this, but I'm not going to lie. I don't even really know what this means. It's funny too, because it's like, the classic trope in literature and film is always like white good, black bad. Like, it's like Darth Vader is black, and, like that's just the thing. And then now they're really flipping it. We're getting the full, just turning it on its ear, the old flip where white is bad and black is good, which, if that's the case, then I wouldn't get in trouble for doing blackface all the time. No, I haven't done that. Although, you know what? Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, he didn't really get in trouble for it. So that is interesting. Okay, a couple more things for this week's episode. By the way, after this week, we'll be back to weekly. I'm going to be putting this out on Thursdays now from now, because I just feel like I was doing this on Tuesdays, and then I kept getting like I'd put it out on a Tuesday or like a Wednesday. I'd record it on a Tuesday, put it out on a Wednesday, or or like put it on a Tuesday, and then something crazy would happen. So, we're going to let most of the week go by. We're going to let, not most of it, but more than 50%, just so you don't get, caught flat-footed. But yeah, so there was a big joke. It wasn't a big joke, but it was a joke where everybody, when Trump was in office, they go, well, yeah, once Trump's out with the COVID stuff, they go, once we get Trump out, COVID, because there was this idea that a lot of states and, Democratic states were punishing Trump by locking down their constituents, like, the population, as a punishment to Trump, to make Trump look bad. And that once Trump was out of office, they'd be like, all right, time to open everything up. COVID's over. We beat it. Now, I'm not saying that's the case, because it's not, and it seems to be getting almost borderline worse, other than the fact that there is a vaccine that seems to be pretty effective and minimal side effects, other than the fact that I read that a bunch of people died from taking it, but they were really old to begin with. Anyways, I don't have a lot of really old listeners, so none of you have to worry. But so the mayor of Chicago and the governor of New York, Cuomo, like, this was like a week ago. They basically were like, you know what? This lockdown's, it's not working. It's time to, we got to open up. We can't just stay closed forever. We're going to ruin our whole economy. And you're like, yeah, I know. That's what kind of everybody's been saying for like quite some time. They've been saying that. And it's just very interesting that right when Trump's like right with his, foot out the door, they're like, you know what? We gave it some thought, totally unrelated to Trump. It doesn't have anything to do with the fact that he's no longer president and has no chance of winning or whatever. But, yeah, we think we need to open up. So, I mean, that's some good news, because, it's been about a year since I've been an actual comedian. I do obviously videos and podcasts, but doing stand-up, it's like I've done so little stand-up in the last year, which I actually started thinking about it recently, because when I was in Canada, and obviously New York before it got shut down, but I was doing so much stand-up. Like, and in Canada, I did like a lot, especially compared to, my peers who would be doing like, because Canada, the way it kind of worked is people would do stand-up, and then you got a little bit of success. You kind of moved up the ladder, and then and you just never see people. You're like, yeah, they just do it occasionally. It would be a rare thing. And I'm now kind of on, like, my comedy schedule is just what a moderately successful Canadian comedian schedule was like before COVID. Like, that's how much comedy I'm doing now. And I'm like, man, I'm like barely a comedian. But then to so many people, this is like, yeah, this is a normal amount of comedy for them to do. But for me, it just feels weird. I haven't done anything. I have barely written any comedy. I've just been doing fucking podcasts. I've done some shows, but it's just not the same. It's not the same. But anyway, so hopefully New York will be open up soon. And then last thing, this is New York related, this is sports related. The New York Mets, they're undergoing, they got a new owner. This guy, Steve Cohen, and then their GM, general manager. So they've had a lot of issues. So last year, I don't know if you follow sports, but last year they hired this guy, Carlos Beltran, who is like, really good baseball player. I don't know if he'd probably make it in the Hall of Fame. Really good. He's won World Series, all that stuff. I think MVPs. They hire him, and then he gets wrapped up in the Astros cheating scandal. So he gets fired like a week after they hire him, something like that, or like 2 weeks. He gets fired, and the Mets have been like a laughingstock forever. Then the Mets they hire this new guy. I can't remember his name, Jared something, and he's been hired for like 3 weeks, and then this thing comes out where he was texting this reporter. He basically sent her like 60 text messages, leaving her voicemails, and then she like wouldn't respond to him. So then he was like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna send her a picture of my cock. I'm like, I don't even care what it looks like. What guy thinks that after, like, I remember there always used to be this thing, like, you don't hear really people talking about it anymore, but it used to be like, it's like women play hard to get, guys like that. And then women would be like, guys, we like to play hard to get. So like, I don't know if this guy has the mentality where he's like, oh, she's just playing hard to get. And he like doesn't understand like when hard to get like ends, and it's just like, leave me the fuck alone. I'm not interested. But so anyways, sends a dick pic, comes out. This was I think a few years ago, gets fired for it. But this is the kind of guy who he just makes, because he's going to be used as an example against all guys. And it's just so ridiculous because literally most guys are not like that. But then when you see that, you go, oh yeah, but some of them are. But anyways, the Mets are cursed. That's all I wanted to say is the Mets are cursed. And they need a new GM, which I could do it. I don't know. I'm probably not. I've sent too many dick pics. Actually, I haven't sent many at all. If you sign up for my super tier $1,000 a month Patreon, though, you'll get 4 dick pics a week. So consider signing up. That has been this week's episode. Glad to be back. That was episode 41. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. Please leave a review, and I will see you next Thursday. And by see you, I won't see you, but you will hear me. Bye.